Hi everyone, this is Amy Leach. I am coming to you today to talk about a new topic. We are going to be talking about all of the steps that it requires to gain an RN license. We're about halfway through the semester now, and now is the time to start thinking about this. You may have had many questions to your faculty or to me over time, and we've put you off at this point until now, because a lot of this stuff is time sensitive. So what I want to prepare you for is this stuff can be a little bit stressful. So I'd like for you to just begin by taking one big deep breath. Realize that this is important information. It's stressful because there's money involved. It's stressful because there's lots of steps involved. It's stressful because it's big. It's exciting, but yet it's pretty big, and things start feeling a little bit real at this point. So go ahead, do it. I want you to take one more deep breath. Did you do along with me? Hopefully you didn't just leave me hanging there. Really, truly, when you're feeling overwhelmed, I think that's one of the first steps to always take, is just to take a deep breath and to reassess things. And know right now, as far as licensure goes, we've got you on this. We are going to be with you along the way and be able to help answer a lot of your questions. We do this all the time, and we deal with a lot of students in a lot of different situations. So please ask questions along the way. If your faculty cannot answer the questions, make sure you get on my calendar, and we're even going to have some opportunity to answer your questions live on some Zoom Q&A live sessions. So keep an eye out as we get through this presentation on that kind of information. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to ask you at various different times to pause the recording and do something. I need you to actually, on your honor, do that. Please go and do the activity and then come back to the recording. Make sure you come back because you probably haven't finished it at that point. But that will help you break this down and kind of allow me to really literally walk you through this process as much as possible as we can in a presentation like this. Remember, you can always stop, rewind, and revisit portions of this presentation, so you're kind of getting that bonus of having this recorded for you. So why don't you pause right now, go grab all the handouts that came associated with this presentation in your LoudCloud announcements. You should be gathering information and handouts on compact licenses. You should be gathering your journey to completion checklist, and you should be gathering there's a worksheet that's intro to the licensure process. So grab all those so you have them handy, because we will be referring to those as we move along. All right, so just some basics on licensure. You have to have a license to practice in the state in which you wish to work. In my 32 years of nursing, I have never worked with a bachelor's prepared nurse or a bachelor's prepared person with a nursing degree that doesn't have a license. In other words, your degree gets you the education that makes you qualified to get a license, but it's not the only step. You have to work with that regulatory body to be able to get permissions to actually practice in that state. So tip number one for you is figure out where you want to work before you start this licensure process. You do not want to have to change gears midway through this process. So if you are unsure of where you want to work, figure that out first and then start the licensure process. You cannot apply for two different states at the same time. Okay? Each state is a bit different. You'll need to know the particular requirements for your state. I refuse to be versed in every single one of the 50 states. Each one of them has very similar nuances, but there are also some very specific things. We have a lot of students come from the Pacific Northwest, from from California, from Colorado, and so we know a lot of the specifics of those things, but you cannot rely on us for that information. You really do need to dig into what is it to get licensed in your state, and you now are starting that professional practice of building that relationship with your regulatory body. You're going to be responsible for knowing what the scope of practice is to practice in that state. You're going to need to understand what the licensure process is, and then what is the renewal. What are the rules associated with it? Like if you change your address, how soon do you need to notify the state board of that change? How often are you going to have to renew your license? What kind of costs are incurred with that? So all of those are things you're going to develop along the way. You do not by any means need to learn all of that today. I'm just giving you an idea of what that relationship with your regulatory body is going to entail on a very general level. So as we're talking about you personally getting licensed here at as a student of GCU, there's three entities or three buckets, shall I say, that we're going to be working from. We're going to be working from the GCU bucket and what you need to do to graduate and to satisfy those needs. So once you've satisfied the graduation piece, you also need to actually apply with the state board of nursing within the state in which you're wanting to work. So like I said at the beginning, you need to figure out where you want to work. That application process actually happens simultaneously as you're finishing up this semester. And then there's the Pearson account that you're going to need to develop. Pearson is the testing company. So the State Boards of Nursing, or NCSBN, National Council State Boards of Nursing, have contracted Pearson, who is a proctoring company, to deliver the exam in the setting and in the manner in which the NCSBN dictates. So you are paying Pearson as well to be able to take that test. So there's three entities we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to get into the weeds with those and really get into the details of each one, but that's kind of the structure in which we're going to talk about this today. So first thing of licensure basics that you should be contemplating is you need to have a government issued ID. It needs to have a picture. It needs to have your signature. It needs to be given to you by the government. So yes, a driver's license, a passport, something of that nature. I am not responsible for checking you off as to whether you have that ID or not. You are responsible for understanding what the requirements are for those IDs from the state board and from Pearson. You'll be using that ID not only presented in your application likely in some way or fashion to identify who you are when you're applying, but then also when you're testing that you are that person that they're expecting to test. So you need to make sure that that ID is valid and that it meets the requirements of both Pearson and your state board. And if not, you need to fix that. The big thing is your first and last names need to match on everything. So when you're doing stuff with GCU related to NCLEX, your forms need to have your name that matches that government ID. Your application for the State Board of Nursing needs to have the matching name as well. Now, middle initials, middle full names don't matter as much. I mean, sure, they need to match whatever you're doing, but they're really looking at first and last names. If you have issues with your name and how your name, maybe you didn't use your full legal name on your GCU application, and so now your files look different than what you will be turning into the state board or to Pearson, or is different than your government issued ID, then you need to satisfy that. You need to fix that. I would contact your SSC. So names need to match. I would also, as a help for you, first of all, find a folder and put all of this important information in the folder. Now, you're getting a lot of this digitally, so create an important folder on your desktop too, for all the things related to NCLEX so that you can go and touch them and be able to gather them if you need to. I would also streamline and make sure you have a nice professional looking email address, not hotgirls.mail, so that you can include your email address for Pearson, for the state board, for GCU, so that you can see all the things that as people are trying to reach out to you. I know you guys have tons of different email addresses, so streamline it, make it one that you're going to be searching regularly. So that's a little bit of the basics. So these are the buckets. I don't want you to squint and try to read all of this information here. I pretty much put this slide in here so that you've got a quick reference. You will have access, if you don't already, to the PDF version of this PowerPoint slide deck. So this can be a nice quick reference slide for you. You also have all of this information detailed for you in your journey to completion checklist. So just another way to reference that there are 3 buckets you're working from, what kinds of things work within all those buckets, and I'm going to go into more details on the upcoming slides. So first, as you're starting to contemplate where do you get licensed, I think that it's important that we talk about compact licensure. Some of you may be excited about applying in Arizona because we're a compact state. And a lot of you get confused in that whole concept, and maybe make some missteps or make some assumptions that maybe you shouldn't make without understanding the full concept. So you do have a couple of handouts in your Loud Cloud announcements attached to all this information. But let me just give you just a down and dirty about what a compact licensure is. So there are multiple states within the country who have come together and determined a minimum requirement for licensure that they all agreed upon, so that they can actually have a workforce that can transit across different state lines. So the compact license is intended for some very specific, more modern applications to the nursing role. We are not really talking about the standard position of I got a job at Banner University on the tele unit and I'm planning on spending my next 3 years there. That's not the kind of role we're talking about. Most of the compact licensure benefits come from if you say I live in the Four Corners region of the United States, and I actually live in Winslow, Arizona, but my job is with Indian Health Services, and I'm traveling each day of my work. I'm traveling to a different health services clinic within all of the different reservations in the Four Corners area. That means that I live in Arizona, which is a compact state. I have a multi-state license, and I can work in any of the Four Corners because Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, the 4 states around the Four Corners, are all compact states. So it doesn't matter which state I'm in, because I have a compact state license, I am okay to work in those areas. But I'm licensed in Arizona because that's where I live. Your primary residence is where your compact licensure is attached to. So if I decided to move to Colorado, keep the same job, I can still work in the Four Corners, but now I need to do what's called endorsement, or asking for privileges to change my licensure to a Colorado license. and then it would be Colorado who would be governing my license. I would be renewing with them, etc. So that's one circumstance. Most of you, as a new grad, are not going to be in that circumstance where there's a job where you're actually straddling across two state lines. Unless you're in a circumstance where you actually are working at a hospital that's in a different state than where you live. There are places like, I don't know, Indiana to Illinois, or Ohio to Michigan, which are areas where Texas to Oklahoma. Those are areas where people typically will live in one state and cross across the border to a health facility in another state. Now, I can't tell you that all those states I just mentioned are compact states. I haven't looked that up to verify. But I think you understand the premise that I'm talking about. If that's something that applies to you, contemplate the steps for compact licensure. Another way that you can use a compact license is if we're in a perfect situation with COVID right now. If you're an Arizona state licensed, multi-state licensed nurse, so you are in a compact state, you have a license, and Colorado is experiencing a huge COVID onslaught, and you are volunteering to go and help with relief in that area. You could do that under your compact license and know that you could still legally practice in that state because you have a compact state license, okay? And Colorado is also a compact state. Now, if you were going to California to help, then you'd need to work with the State Board of Nursing on what kind of licensure you need. Do you need a temporary license? Do you need to fully endorse your license? What kind of permissions do you need to gain in order to legally practice there? Because California is not a compact state. So your compact license is not recognized as kind of an easy entrance into that state for that moment. So you would need to be cognizant of that. Another way that you can use a compact state license is if you're educating online across state lines. So let's say I live in Colorado, but I'm working for GCU Online. Then I would need to make sure that I have the rights to practice in that state that school exists. And because I have a compact state license, if I were in Colorado, that would not be a problem. So that's yet another idea. And then if you are in a circumstance of doing telehealth, I know Banner has multiple sites across the nation, and one of their roles is to do telephone triage or telehealth. If you are a nurse practitioner, you might be doing telehealth. The compact state license allows you to be residing in one state with that institution or entity, and then actually practicing or providing care to a patient who is physically in another state, as long as it's a compact state you're dealing with. So I think those are the four main ways that a compact state license helps you, and for most of you, it doesn't apply. Most of you are going to get the traditional kind of job that is in a hospital where you're likely to stay put for a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. So you would be seeking initial licensure or licensure by examination in that state that you want to work. If it happens to be a compact state, you don't usually check, yes, I want a multi-state license. Most states automatically evaluate your application for whether you would qualify for multi-state or not. And then if you qualify for it, you would get a multi-state license at the time that you actually achieve licensure, meaning you passed NCLEX and you've satisfied all of their other requirements. For here in Arizona, that's exactly what happens. If you have satisfied all their requirements for compact license, then they just deem that to you as a multi-state license. If you don't qualify for the multi-state license, then you would get a single state license. Okay, so why don't you pause this recording right now? if any of this applies to you, and go ahead and review the compact state licensure handouts that were attached with your Loud Cloud announcements. Now, if you are a California resident and looking at applying for California and working in California, California is not a compact state. There are other states that are not compact states. If you are in, so this part would not apply to you. You don't have to pause. You don't have to look over those handouts right now. You could maybe just tuck those handouts away in case it should come up later. If you live in any other state where they're pending compact licensure, it still doesn't apply to you. It's not a compact state yet, so you can just move along and we can go on to our next portion. So like I said, go ahead and pause the recording if you need to dive into that compact state information a little bit further, and then come on back. Okay, so now let's dip into our buckets. First, we're going to talk about the GCU bucket. So this is the graduation process. The very first step in this process is stuff you're already doing. Finish strong. Complete all the requirements for your nursing program. And that means all of them. So, there may be little things along the way that have fallen away as crumbs that you don't even realize, little one credit somethings or a document that you never did send in, things along those lines. Just because you are accepted to a nursing program does not mean you have satisfied all of those requirements. So you do need to make sure that an accounting is done for all the requirements of the program. You need to pay all your fees. You will not graduate from GCU if you do not have a zero balance. So for whatever those fees are, whatever the arrangements are that you need to make, whether it's a late library book or some sort of a dorm fee, a parking fee, or tuition that you're working on paying off, whatever it is, you do need to have a zero balance, right down to if you have $20 balance, they're not going to graduate you. So go ahead and satisfy those things or make arrangements for that. Apply for graduation. You actually do need to notify the university that your intention is to graduate. And it may seem kind of ridiculous right now because we know you're in this program and you're following the steps of the program, and the nursing program is even quite prescribed. So why wouldn't GCU just know that I'm done with my program? Well, some of you might already be enrolled in minors. Nursing students might get minors in coaching or counseling or business administration or leadership. There's all kinds of things that you can get minors in. So you need to indicate to GCU that you're done, that you're intending to go ahead and graduate. So do apply for that, and then pay the fee. And this is where the groaning usually starts. There's a $150 fee, and that is not just for cap and gown. That's actually, I don't think at all for the cap and gown. That's not for the ceremony. That is more the whole process of pulling you through the graduation process from an administration perspective. There's a lot of things that happen on the back end, not just for that ceremony, but also for the accounting and the reconciling of your transcripts and the conferring of your degree, the diploma itself, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, there is a fee, and that's just part of life. There are fees associated with services rendered. So pay that fee. And then make an appointment with your SSD to review your account and ensure you're on track. They can go through and make sure that you've checked all those boxes as best as they can see for getting to the graduation status. If you don't know where to find this application for graduation, check your student portal for GCU. If you're still struggling or you don't know if you've made that payment yet, you're looking for a confirmation, whatever it is, work with your SSD. They can help you. So why don't you take this moment now, pause the recording, and schedule a meeting with your SSD. Apply for graduation in your GCU portal, or at least try to find that application graduation. Verify that you've already filled it out if you think maybe you have, and pay the fee. Come on back. Okay, so now we have to start splitting our conversations a little bit. If you know that you are applying for anywhere outside of Arizona for licensure, then there's a few extra steps that you're going to have to do, or different steps along the way. So I do need to ask for forgiveness in that I'm going to have to speak to you guys in a couple different groups. One who is Arizona, and one who is, applying outside of Arizona. So put your listening cap on and really pay attention to these details, because it can start to get a little bit confusing. Okay. Remember, you can always pause or and take some notes, or rewind a little bit. So when you are applying for licensure outside of Arizona, there are many states that actually require an additional form. Every state requires that you've graduated from a reputable licensed nursing program. GCU meets that qualification in every state. Okay, so that's done, right? Once you go to grad status, good, you've got that done. But there are different ways that each state asks you to prove that. And they all get a little bit convoluted, shall I say. Most of them require official transcripts showing your conferred degree that you've completed the program. So please do not request transcripts right now. GCU has you on this step of the process. This actual transcript will be at GCU's cost, so don't worry about that right now. But if you are applying outside of Arizona, what you need to think about is what else is required in order for my state to be satisfied with my education. And oftentimes there's an additional form that needs to be filled out. And it is probably a two-part form oftentimes, that the student fills out part of it and then the school fills out the other part. Sometimes exclusively the school fills it out, but it's your responsibility to make sure that we get that form, that we know that that's the state that you're applying for and this is required. So what we ask of you is, in your Journey to Completion packet, your checklist, on page 2 at the bottom of the page, there are very explicit instructions. If your state requires a special form to be filled out by your school verifying your education, it might be called Certificate of Completion. It might be called Education Verification Form. It might be called Request for Transcripts Form. All of those things, or something of that nature. If it's something the school must fill out on your behalf and then send to the State Board of Nursing, you need to send that to the school. So there are instructions that I need you to follow on page 2 of your Journey to Completion packet. And follow them explicitly right down to how to label your email subject matter, so that we can search and find that in our College of Nursing and Healthcare Professions inbox. And that needs to be completed before graduation. This is an extra step if you're outside of Arizona for licensure. If you are applying inside of Arizona, you do not need to worry about this step. Okay? So you do need to then, once all of you, this now applies to everybody, all of you, once you have moved to graduation status, you've completed the program, the final grades are submitted for all of your courses, the term has finalized for level 4, and you and OAR, Office of Academic Records, has reviewed your transcripts and moved you to grad status, okay? Meaning that your degree has conferred and you are now graduated. First of all, that process can take up to 6 weeks. There's thousands of GCU students, and it takes time to comb through. GCU has a great deal of pride and ownership to the requirements necessary to achieve that status of having a diploma and a conferred degree. And so it does take some time. So Office of Academic Records will scan through, comb through each one of your transcripts and make sure that all of you have met the same requirements. And as your file comes up and they review you, then they move you to grad status. When you move to grad status, then that will trigger you to get an email from GCU the next business day saying congratulations that you have completed your requirements for graduation, and you need to go to your student portal, go to the e-documents, and acknowledge your education verification form. And what you're doing in that step is you are triggering OAR, Office of Academic Records, as to where to send your transcripts and maybe that required form if you had one for your specific state. That's the trigger. So up to 6 weeks it could take. Some of you will go faster than that. Some of you will take 5-6 weeks. It just depends on how Office of Academic Records weeds through the entire pile of all the GCU graduates. And then you'll get that trigger. You will acknowledge the document. If it's for Arizona, if you're choosing Arizona as your state, you'll click that box, and then you'll have a brief little form to verify all the information is correct and submit it. If you are out of state, you will then be able to indicate which state you are seeking licensure in, and then that, again, is the trigger for OAR to send your transcripts on your behalf. If you are applying for out of state, that request then triggers transcripts to be printed, sealed, met up with any required forms on your behalf, and then sent by post office to the Board of Nursing. So you should be expecting that process will take at least 2 weeks from beginning to end, and that might even not be quite enough, depending on your Board of Nursing and how fast they process things once they arrive. So this step is important to understand. If you are applying for Arizona, what this triggers is a checkbox in an electronic drop box with the State Board of Nursing. Things can happen pretty quickly because we're in that state and we have agreements with Arizona State Board of Nursing. So I know this can be a little confusing. Rewind a little bit if you need to. Listen to it carefully. Listen to the portions that apply to you. But if you are out of state, you have to look through your application for the state board to see if there are additional forms that you need the school to fill out for you. Once you go to grad status, which can take up to 6 weeks, then you're going to get an email. All of you will get an email. And you have to tell the school where you're applying. And with that electronic trigger, then OAR will do what they need to do. In Arizona, it will be that they go into the portal with AZBN and check a box saying, yep, they graduated. And with the out-of-state applicants, then they will follow the processes either by sending your official transcripts or by sending your official transcripts plus the additional forms that you have indicated that are needed by mail to that Board of Nursing. And what I want you to understand is official transcripts means it goes directly from the school to the Board of Nursing and you don't touch them in between. Hence why I don't want you requesting anything, okay, from the official transcripts perspective. Okay, we're leaving the GCU bucket, and now we're going to work in the State Board of Nursing bucket. Okay, now, first let me say, when you are Googling your State Board of Nursing, and that's really how I intend for you to find them, some of them are not actually state boards of nursing. They may be a Department of Health or some other sort of healthcare entity, regulatory body that also has the medical and the pharmacists and even the aesthetists and the nail salon people underneath them. There's licensure boards that are just for nursing. There are licensure boards that have kind of an umbrella approach. It really depends on the state. I'm sorry, this is where it gets confusing for each of you because I have no one generic way of speaking about this because none of the states are generic. Most of the time I'm speaking in reference to the Arizona State Board of Nursing because by and large, most of you are applying in Arizona. Again, what you need to do is apply for only one state. If you right now are just at a crossroads and having a hard time deciding where to apply, you've got lots of different things to figure out. You have lots of different choices, lots of different ideas going on in your head. You have special circumstances. Please make an appointment to come see me. Not your success coach, but see me. I kind of am the resident expert for licensure for GCU students. So you can make an appointment at www.amyleachsuccess.as.me and find a licensure appointment. That'll be a 30-minute, so we won't be able to have long conversations about your data and your NCLEX prep. If you need that too, then make a longer appointment. But I really do want to be able to help you to make some of these decisions. I will not tell you, oh, just test in Arizona. It'll be fine. I will kind of work through what are you dealing with and help you ask some of those big questions that you can contemplate and make the best decisions for yourself. And I'm not mom. I'm not always going to say, oh, just come home. So know that I can be that sounding board for you. Also, most of the State Board of Nursing have a pretty standard approach for what they require. It's more not just what they require that makes them unique, but it's how they want you to prove it or how they want you to obtain it, or even the time frame in which it is. So some of you may find as you're researching that your state doesn't even allow you to apply until after you graduate. Okay, that's all you can do. But if your state allows you to apply early, which Arizona does, and California and Washington, I believe, and some of the other states, then you go ahead, and now would be the time to go ahead and start researching and getting started with that. But the general requirements are, do you have the right to work in the U.S.? Do you have residency? That gets back to the compact state discussion. So residency is for that state. Do you actually live in that state? Are you a resident? That's usually not a criteria that will make you unlicensable in that state or to get rejected for a license, but it may determine what kind of license you are obtaining. Is it a single state versus a multi-state license? And then you're going to have completed a nursing program. There is not one State Board of Nursing who allows you to be a truck driver one day and just test out, take NCLEX, and decide to be a nurse. You have to complete a full nursing program. So each program's verification process is a little bit different. We've talked about that on previous slides, but you'll want to look for, do you need a request for transcripts, certificate of completion, or some sort of an official transcripts form in addition to your official transcripts. So remember, please follow the instructions on your Journey to Completion packet and how you would submit those forms to us. There's always fees. When you're dealing with any of these steps, there are going to be fees involved. Just as a reference point, Arizona State Board of Nursing's fee is $350 for initial licensure. You are looking for instructions for how to apply as a new applicant, a licensure by examination, or an initial licensure, your first license, a new grad license, something along those lines. They all word them a little differently, but it's that kind of application. There are fees associated. Now, I have not seen one higher than Arizona. So if you're in some of those other states, California is exactly the same as Arizona's, it's $350, but there are other states that are much lower. So there are some benefits from being out of the state. Another requirement, no surprise, you must pass NCLEX. You will not get a license until you pass NCLEX. And then there's a background check almost always. There might be a few states that don't do background checks, but they're very few and far between, and not often the states that you guys are applying for. A background check is really what is required, but what they're asking you to do for that background check is not making the application like you did for your fingerprint clearance card. You do not need to actually pay for the background check and submit forms for that. The State Board of Nursing will take care of that on their end. What they need from you is fingerprints generally. So there are very specific requirements for each state, and it's different for each state. For example, California requires LifeScan, which is a company, a vendor, who does digital scanning and pushes those things out in a digital way to the background check company for the state. So that's California. The thing is you have to be in California to get those done. They also require that you do that after the application. Whereas in Arizona, you do actual traditional rolled prints. They hand you a fingerprint card that has those prints on them, and then you turn those in to the Arizona State Board of Nursing as part of your application at the beginning. So you need to step through the process and really look at the details. This is where you really pay attention, read every word, really process what it's asking you, figure out the timeline that you need to do things, and just do so very carefully, very methodically, very meticulously. There may be other additional state requirements, one of which might be they ask you to submit a picture of an ID, or with California, they ask you to actually get a little 2x2 passport-like photo. So look through all those requirements, make sure you're satisfying whatever they are. Some states actually require that you take a little intro course or a scope of practice course or something like that. So just look at all of those requirements. Okay, so I'm going to take a break from talking for a few minutes and let you pause, go find your State Board of Nursing website and for the state that you want to work in. If you're unsure, then go with kind of your top choice right now and investigate what it is. And then read the instructions for that application. Don't apply right now. Don't fill out portals. Don't create profiles quite yet. We're getting there, but not yet. I just want you to go find the State Board of Nursing website, navigate to the new applicant or licensure by examination instructions for what it entails to actually apply, and then come on back. And oh, by the way, there's a little portion on your worksheet that you're going to want to start filling out because you're going to need to hand that in as a requirement for your class. So go ahead and be doing that simultaneously, and I'll see you in just a few minutes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about fingerprints. Now that you've started to navigate around and you have some ideas a little bit about what's required, most states do require fingerprints. And you have to pay for the fingerprinting service. So, you can go to UPS. If you're here in Arizona, the state requires a particular form, so know what form that is. You don't have to really fill it out or take it with you because there are plenty of forms at the vendors usually. But you can go to a UPS store that's doing fingerprints. I would call ahead, make sure that they have that service and that they don't require an appointment or something, or certainly make that appointment if they do. Find out the hours that's best to go for fingerprints and what the cost is, because you're asking for a service. So you have to expect that you're paying for that service. Now, it's probably going to be less than $50. It's not a huge cost, but do expect that you're going to need to pay them. For other than Arizona, I just can't emphasize it enough. Find the instructions and follow them explicitly. If your state, like Washington, is going to mail you information after your application, obviously you can't do anything about fingerprints now, so don't stress over it. But do try to figure out how you're going to get that information and where is it going to get mailed to, and be prepared to pull that trigger as soon as you get that information. information from them, okay? So you want to time this with your Board of Nursing application, and they're very specific on what you do first. So like I said, California, you do your fingerprints as a request. You're requesting a link once you apply. So you're trying to finish that process after you've actually done the application process. And please be aware that application needs to be as complete as possible. So make sure that anything that was required before you hit submit, you have uploaded or paid for or whatever it is, okay? So once your state application is submitted, oftentimes you can't pull it back, you can't edit it, you can't add to it. And so you just want to be very, again, meticulous and detail-oriented. The fingerprints that they're asking for are never your fingerprint clearance card. All of you had a fingerprint clearance card done before you started the nursing program that was GCU and clinical agencies in Arizona specific. It is not what you're needing for the State Board of Nursing. Every single one of you listening to this recording right now, hear me say this. You have a fingerprint clearance card, and when you're done with clinicals at GCU, you're done with that. You do not need that for the State Board of Nursing. It will not work for you. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't need fingerprints because I already have that card, you are wrong. You need to follow the instructions for your state and get fingerprints as directed. And again, some might need to be done in the state that you're applying. So if you're in Arizona and you're not applying for Arizona, you might need to actually go to that state at some point and get those fingerprints done. Okay? Fingerprints are submitted as part of the background check for the Board of Nursing. They are federal and state background, so anything going on in the federal government, like a federal government shutdown or something, can impact the timing of these prints being run and the background checks. But the Board of Nursing does send that background check for you. I know I've said this a couple of times, but this is stuff that ends up being a lot of questions, so I'm repeating myself on purpose so that you guys can get this. So the fingerprints generally take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to process. So if your state allows it, the question I get most often is, when should I do these? You do them as soon as your state allows it. So if you are applying and you need to include your fingerprints, like with Arizona, as part of your application process, then you need to do that as soon as possible. But you don't ever turn in your fingerprints before you turn in your application, because they don't have anything to attach them to. Here in Arizona, they will reject them and send them back to you. But it's not because the prints aren't good, it's because they don't have anything to attach it to. You need to apply first and then hand in your prints. And you can literally do that the same day or, hours later. You can get your fingerprints, hang on to the card, and then submit your application and then walk in your fingerprints. You can drop them off at the State Board of Nursing. If you don't do that, I recommend that you send them by certified mail receipt requested so that you can get proof that they have been delivered. Because this is something that will hold up your application for sure. Make sure you're getting the right prints. Again, follow the instructions. Okay, so pause the recording now and go find the requirements specific to background checks, fingerprints in your application information for the state that you're thinking of applying for. If you find nothing about fingerprints, it may be embedded in the actual application itself. If you still find nothing, it may not be required, or they are going to send you that information after the fact. So they're just trying to eliminate too many people getting fingerprints done ahead of time. So use your worksheet from your Loud Cloud announcements to help guide the process, because you'll, again, need to turn that in. Come back, though. Okay. So hopefully you took a little bit of break, as I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk at this point, but there's a lot of information here, so I'm glad you're still with me. There's a piece of this process with the State Board of Nursing that you need to be aware of, because it causes anxiety, and really it's not a problem. It's a good thing. And it's called the Notice of Deficiency. Each State Board of Nursing has a little different way of communicating this information, but basically, once a state board reviews your application and says, okay, you're missing this, we're still waiting for this, we have these, this is in progress. That's a reconciliation of their process and what's left still hanging in order to satisfy your application. In other words, in order to get licensed. So typically what happens, if you start this process right away, sometime close to graduation, they may have already reviewed your application and actually delivered a notice of deficiency. And some of the things that might be on there, if you got this at that point in time, is we don't have your transcripts yet. That doesn't mean GCU's fallen down on the job and not sent your transcripts. That means you haven't graduated yet. There are no transcripts to send. It's just part of that application process that they notify you, we've reviewed your application, you're missing these things. None of you at that point will have taken NCLEX because you can't, because you haven't graduated. You have to graduate in order to qualify to take NCLEX. So I want you to just read through that information, note the date. This is a good time for me to tell you, I would note dates down in your calendar for all the times that you do something related to this process. You paid for your grad fees, you applied for graduation, you applied for the State Board of Nursing. What date did that happen? Because if you're talking to me 3 weeks after you graduate about, are you ready to test? When do you think you'll get your ATT? I need that information of dates and times and things to try to think about your state, your circumstances, and back, figure out where you're at in the process and when we might be able to predict that your ATT counts. The ATT is the affidavit to test. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So notice of deficiency is not you did something wrong, but you do need to read it. It's part of the normal process. It gives you information about your application process. It is a reconciling and an accounting of what is left to be completed before you could actually achieve licensure. And there may be things in there where there is action required. Many times there's no action required on your part at all, but if there's any action, it may show up there. Like, your fingerprints were rejected, we need another copy because they were too light, or something along those lines. Or you still haven't sent us your citizenship documentation, or something along those lines. So make sure you're reading things meticulously and you understand them. If you need help along that process, shoot me an email, send me a screenshot. I can maybe help you. But please don't see the word deficiency and think something's wrong. Okay. I told you we talk about it. Here it is. The eligibility to test, or the affidavit to test, ATT. What happens in this process is because you are applying for initial licensure, that cues the State Board of Nursing that you need to take NCLEX. The State Board of Nursing is the one who deems you eligible and allows you to test. Okay, so what you're waiting for in order to take NCLEX is for you to satisfy enough of the application process that the state board grants you that privilege of taking NCLEX. And they do that by sending an affidavit to test to Pearson, the testing company. So until you get your affidavit to test, you will not be able to schedule NCLEX. You will not be able to look at what the schedule might be. So none of that is disclosed to you until you meet those requirements. The number one, there are three major requirements. You need to submit a complete application to the State Board of Nursing and pay your fees. And then you also need to have completed a nursing program. If you have submitted your fingerprints, but they haven't processed fully yet, some state boards of nursing will still allow you to test, but they will not finalize your licensure until that background check is complete, for pretty obvious reasons. Eligibility to test does not equal licensure. Just because you pass NCLEX does not mean you have a license. There are various different things that can help you, that can hold you up from actually getting that license. For instance, you have something in your background check that popped up and requires some explanation and documentation. They will not license you until that's done. I don't care what you did for NCLEX and what an awesome score you got or whatever it is. You can be sitting there having passed NCLEX and still not have a license, okay? If your background check just hasn't completed yet, that's something that'll hold you up. So just be aware, this is a process, and it's the State Board of Nursing's right to determine your eligibility and offer you the privilege to work in their state. It is not that they must let you work in the state. Once you're deemed eligible to test by the Board of Nursing, the Board of Nursing will then send your affidavit to test Pearson VUE. So if you haven't created an account with Pearson VUE at that point, they won't send it because they won't send it to a black hole. So that's kind of your time mark to be able to create your Pearson account and pay your fee for them. And I'll talk about that again in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into Pearson. We've talked about GCU bucket and graduation and the steps for that. We've talked about the various requirements for the State Board of Nursing and earning your eligibility to test and fingerprinting and things like that. We've also talked about how the State Board of Nursing is the one who deems you eligible, and once they deem you eligible to take NCLEX, which is only a portion of licensure, then they will send that affidavit to test to Pearson. And so, once you are eligible to test, then the State Board of Nursing will send your ATT to Pearson. And again, you have to create a Pearson account and have paid the fee in order for them to actually do that. So you can create a profile online with Pearson at any point in time from now till the time that you get finish the process with the State Board of Nursing. But at the latest, I would prefer that you create that profile and pay for Pearson for the testing portion when you move to grad status. So I want you to use that cue of you're acknowledging that e-doc with Grand Canyon in your student profile, telling them, or student portal, telling GCU where you're seeking licensure. Use that as your trigger point for when you create your Pearson VUE account and pay for it. I don't believe that you need to pay somebody months in advance for something that you don't need yet. But if there are those people out there who you've got the money, it doesn't matter, it will drive you crazy if you don't just satisfy that need because you're worried you'll forget about it, you absolutely could pay it now. But your drop dead time or the deadline for you to pay it so that you know you're not standing in your own way of having all of this process work is to pay and create that profile with Pearson when you move to graduated status and acknowledge that e-doc with Grand Canyon. So you also have an attachment in your announcement. It's called the Candidate Bulletin. That's written by the National Council, State Boards of Nursing, and Pearson. And it gives you an idea of identification required for the exam. It gives you an idea of the whole process from before the test, during the test, and after the testing from Pearson's perspective. I really don't recommend you read that cover to cover now. You don't need all of that information, but if you have questions about name changes or identification, that's where you can find that official information. So that's why I provided it to you at this point. Pearson is who will allow you to schedule your test. So once they receive your ATT, they will send you an email and you will be able to log into your Pearson account. They'll give you some sort of an identification number, and then you will be able to search the vicinity in which you want to take your exam for what testing sites have test dates available in what time frame. So it's kind of like a Yelp search. You can always do testing centers near me, and then you can widen that search by radius. Here's where I want to tell you, you do not have to take the NCLEX exam in the same state that you are seeking licensure. Pearson is a national company. The exam is a national exam. You can take that exam at any testing site with Pearson within the continental U.S., including Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. I don't recommend you take it in Canada because you will probably be taking it in French, or it'll be an international version of NCLEX. So stick to within the U.S. borders. But if you're visiting grandma over the fall and you're wanting to take NCLEX while you're there and she lives in Buffalo, New York, well, then you look in that radius of testing centers and see about it. The one thing I will say to you is if you are traveling, let's say you and your best nursing school buddy want to take the exam at the same place at the same time. First of all, let me caution you. Are you both ready at the same time? You do not test until you are ready. But let's say you decide you're both taking it in San Francisco. And so you're going to have to travel from Arizona to San Francisco. Your friend lives in San Francisco, so she doesn't have to travel that far. I do want you to consider your test time and your travel. You need to be taking NCLEX when you are at your absolute very best. So if you are a morning person, take a morning exam. If you are an afternoon person, do not take a morning exam. And do not travel and be rushing from an airport or from a freeway to get into a test center for a big exam like this. I want you to be there the night before, get a good night's rest, and then do all of your normal testing kind of rituals so that you are ready mentally, physically, emotionally to take this exam. Okay? And again, not gonna hold back here. You do not test until you're ready. How do you know you're ready? Ask me. I can help you figure that out. So yes, you can make an appointment with me to know if you're ready. Once you're a graduate, you have access to me by www.amyleachsuccess.as.me. Okay? Okay, so I think it's time for a real quick review here. Everybody take a deep breath. I know these were a lot of facts and a lot of things coming at you. So just take it one step at a time. Try to absorb all of this. Walk through the process. We've given you that checklist that will help kind of guide you. But just as kind of a recap, what you first need to do is finish and graduate strong while starting this application process. So the things that you can start doing now, aside from meeting with your SSC and making sure you're on track for graduation, is to apply for graduation and pay the fees, and apply for the State Board of Nursing that you're intending to work for the state that you're intending to work, and pay the fees and start the fingerprint process if indicated and when indicated. When you move to grad status, 0 to 6 weeks after grades are finalized, which happens the week after graduation, then you're going to have to complete an e-document in your student portal indicating the state that you're going to apply with. From that trigger, your transcripts or education verification in whatever form your state requires is going to be sent by the school to the Board of Nursing. You need to create a Pearson account and pay for it. You can do it at any point between now and the time that you verify that e-doc in your student portal. The Board of Nursing at that point, once they review your profile, your application, and all things are satisfied, then they will send your ATT to Pearson. Pearson, the testing company, then emails you with the opportunity to schedule the NCLEX. Now, again, only test when you're ready, not just because you're eligible. Okay? Eligibility means that you're allowed. Ready means you can pass. We want you to pass on the first attempt. I'm sure you want to too. So that's just a quick review. And remember, you can always rewind and replay this as many times as you need to. So what should you do to get started, or when should you get started? We've just talked about what you should do. So when should you get started? Now. Go ahead and start investigating this and moving along in this process as best as you can. I know some of you are going to have to budget for some money to be able to do this. I want you to recognize where things are time sensitive, really comb through those instructions with the State Board of Nursing and walk through this process. Use your checklist, use that candidate bulletin, complete your worksheet that's the intro to the licensure process, since you're going to be required to turn that in for your faculty, and set up a plan for yourself so that you can really kind of keep pace with all of this. Make a things to do list, use your calendar, reminders, all of that. And then write down any questions you have, because we're going to have question and answer sessions to be able to help you through this. We've done this often enough that I know you can't gain it all just in one sitting. So do you have a lot of those questions spinning around in your head? Write them down. And then pause the recording right now and go sign up for one of these Zoom meetings. We have 2 of them scheduled right now, one specific for those in Arizona and one specific for those out of state. Because it gets a little bit convoluted, the instructions are quite different depending on what state you're talking about. So we have kind of segregated them in that way. So make sure you sign up for the right one. You can see the links here to be able to sign up. There's only one date available now. I really want you guys to get a lot of these questions answered now so you can get started and not be the one who's delaying your ability to test. So go ahead and sign up for one of these. If we have a situation where it's just absolutely necessary that we add some more sessions, we will. We've got you on this. If you have a weird kind of one-off kind of question that you don't think the whole general populace needs to be involved in because it's quite personal, then please send that to me in an email, or you can schedule an appointment with me for licensure questions, and that's where you get 30 minutes of my time one-on-one, okay? So go ahead and pause and sign up for one of those question and answers right now. Okay. So if you have a life event coming up that's going to impact your NCLEX prep, like a wedding, which is yours, not you're just attending a wedding, or you're traveling longer than 1 week, you have a mission trip planned, or there are other events coming up, some surgery or some other event that you just know is going to distract or interrupt your NCLEX prep, then I want you to make an appointment to come see me. I will not tell you don't get married. I will not tell you don't go on the mission trip. I will ask you questions and help you to figure out the timing of all things, to be able to help you really plan and be successful at all of it. So please sign up to come see me if any of that applies to you. Also, if you're having trouble deciding where to license, make an appointment to come see me. If you're scoring less than 800 on your HESI and you have not made an appointment yet, please don't make me chase you. Please make an appointment to come see me. Those are all reasons to be making an appointment with me now. Okay, my time gets filled up very quickly. I will do the best to accommodate any special requests for timing, but do recognize I've gotten quite popular, so go grab your appointment while you can. Okay, so what's next? Well, Have you made an appointment with your success coach yet? If you haven't, you should have received an email from them already. Now's the time. You're far enough in. Exit is approaching. My number one experience with all of you guys is that typically people write beautiful plans and then don't execute them. So don't let that be you. Use us, the coaches, as your accountability partner. Make an appointment with us and plan on reporting out how you're doing your plan. And that will keep you on track. Just knowing you have to go and report out to somebody of authority is going to help to kind of keep you on track. So let us help you. I've included the special links for the various different coaches. Please stick to the coach that's been assigned to you so that it doesn't cause additional time in trying to switch you around or whatever. So do schedule carefully. And all of you will be required to see your coach, well, see in air quotes right now, but to meet with your coach after exit 1, before exit 2 in that week 10. So make sure you at least have that appointment on the calendar because they will all fill up really fast, okay? Alrighty, I think that we have covered a lot of topics today. And I just want to thank you for your time and attention and activity in trying to navigate this somewhat confusing and very stressful situation for yourselves. And this is one of the next steps that you get to do to become an official registered nurse. So take them seriously, get started, and let us know how we can help you.